So um, I'll go I'll go ahead and hand it over to our presenter.
All right. Hi, everyone. Today's presentation is going to be From Necessity to Success, OER in Early Childhood Education, and how open educational resources improved accessibility in learning. I'm Diona Williams. I'm an early childhood education faculty at Tohono O'odham Community College. And I want to just share a little bit about my own journey getting into OER materials and a little bit about my work in early childhood. So I was introduced to OER materials over a decade ago as a college student. And I remember when I first was taking a class online, I was like, where's the book? What's wrong with this book? Why is it embedded? And why am I not holding a physical textbook? And I feel like I have to share that part of my journey into using OER because it's something that I often hear from students as well. I've been at Tohono O'odham Community College. This is my sixth year, and I've been working in early childhood education for over 25 years. Part of what I want to share in today's presentation is just a series of stories of success, positive, negative, pros and cons about the early childhood program transitioning to OER materials, but also sharing the college initiative and going into OER as well. Are there some frustrations about our journey into open source? Absolutely. But I'm hoping by just sharing this that it might inspire some people that are other faculty at other institutions that are thinking about it and not really sure. And I hope that it just inspires you to say yes and go forward with it. So the objectives of today's presentation is to talk about early childhood education program story into OER textbooks, the positive impact of transitioning the program to OER, along with the college initiative to going into OER, lessons learned, some success in OER textbooks in the early childhood program. The transition to OER. So, of course, as I mentioned, this is going to be story time. This is story number one. Why and how did the early childhood education program transition to OER textbooks at a tribal community college? So, if you're not familiar with Tohono O'odham Community Colleges, we're located in the Shukdoak district, which is an hour southwest of Tucson. I have to mention that, so just to give you guys an idea of where we are. Also, we are about 15 minutes from Cells, which is the capital of the Tohono O'odham Nation. So I started at the college in fall of 2019. And if you can imagine being your first year in higher education as a faculty, you're handed maybe some previous syllabi, some textbooks. And again, I'm an early childhood educator by trade, and I don't really have a lot of experience teaching secondary or older students. So I remember opening these textbooks and thinking to myself, this isn't it. And even though my students had purchased the books at this point, I remember struggling doing lectures because I felt like the materials were not really connected for the students, not just for the students, but even for myself as a person of color. And so by the end of that semester, going into spring of 2020, I had the opportunity to develop a psych course completely on Canvas. Now, mind you, in 2019, we had Canvas at our college, but we were not quite using it full time as we are using it today. And so basically, the idea of me being able to teach an asynchronous psych course completely online was really intriguing to me. And that's when I was able to learn about OER materials. And I was introduced to like Rice University and then OpenStax textbooks. And so the psych class was actually kind of my gateway into using OER, at least in general education courses. And so at this point, I had only had access to one, I mean, just one child development OER textbook that was shared with me from our social work faculty at that time. But I knew I wanted to be on a quest to find more books because I really was not pleased with the materials with our published books that we had. Now, when I'm making reference to published books, this is not like a negative talk. This is just honest story and conversation of what was going on. So as you know, what happened in spring of 2020, the pandemic happened. And I remember I was teaching this child development course and the psych course and along with others. And I thought I have this giant child development book, but then I have this open source material. And I started to slowly kind of embed this open source material into our child development class. And that was the first time that the early childhood program had started to use a little bit of open source material. By summer of 2020, our college decided to offer free waive tuition for all Native students with an ID. So our program in early childhood went from 45 students in total to doubling. And at this point, we went from 350 students a semester to today having over 1,200 students a semester. We are still offering waive tuition at this time. But the same challenges I had with our materials in fall of 2019 now has become kind of exacerbated because we're no longer just working with our students from the Tohono O'odham Nation, we're working with other tribes throughout the state and throughout the United States. And so I remember by fall of 2020 attending the Arizona Transfers meeting and with my ECE colleagues, and they started to share these open source materials. And it was from that point on that another colleague of mine at Cochise College was like, we need to meet. You need to join this group because I think this is going to help us. And that's the best part of like living and working in rural areas. We all just somehow figure out to connect and work together. But it doesn't mean that our urban area community colleges were not helpful to us because I know for a fact that our program would not even be talking about OER if it wasn't for their support in sharing these resources with us. Which brings me to spring of 2021. By spring of 2021, I had pretty much had it with our textbooks because now that we were serving students, not just locally for the Tohono O'odham Nation, but across the United States, having access to materials in their textbooks were challenging pre-pandemic. It was even more challenging moving forward. And so that's when I knew that the program had to pivot to completely open source materials. Why OER was a necessary transition for us. The challenges before OER, like I mentioned in the story early on, was that the materials were honestly not culturally relevant content at all. Nothing about what I was asking the students to read was connected to their experiences and where they were working. And that was pre-pandemic and of course, even now in present day. Also limited student access to learning materials. This was a real challenge. I have students that live in very remote areas. And so being able to send textbooks from the Tohono O'odham Nation to parts of Oklahoma to Washington State, I would be 8 weeks into class sometimes with a quarter of the class with their textbooks and the remaining class not having a book at all. And so at that point, I was already doing open source because I had to find a way to make sure that the students that were online or in other remote areas could still participate and complete their courses at the same success rate as their other peers that had their textbooks. So limited access, having those physical textbooks. And then, of course, I think we can all relate to having high costs of textbooks. My favorite story as a college student, and I share this with my students, spending $200 on a textbook to only return it at the end of the semester, still covered in its plastic, and only getting $35 back, to only know that it's probably going to be resold for $200 the following semester. Textbooks are extremely expensive, and working in a field where in terms of us getting paid, the equity issues of getting paid in early childhood can be challenging, but we are still expected to be professionals and be educated. And so having that cost was really stressful for my students. The actual transition. So I wanted to share like the actual steps of me going through this process. I have to say that this is not something that happened overnight. It did not happen in a day, and it honestly didn't happen in a semester. I've been transitioning the courses as early as spring of 2021, And even till this day, I can find a resource that I'm like, I think this is great. And then I teach from it, I test it out with students, and I'm very honest with them and saying, I'm trying out a new open source text along with some materials that I'm bringing in to figure out if this is going to be a good fit for us. And it takes time. So when I'm sharing the transitional steps, this is just kind of a global perspective. So it started with me honestly redesigning the courses, and now I'm kind of in more of an enhancing phase of this transition. And what has happened is that I'm able to create things that are more meaningful discussions, and the learning activities are meaningful along with their projects, because now the materials are more relatable to what they're seeing in their classrooms. And also the cultural component is just as key. I also took an entire academic year to develop some slide decks for every single lecture to align with all of my open source materials that I've gathered over the years. And now it allows me to, again, to continuously evolve and enhance those materials. Of course, collaborating with other early childhood education faculty across the state has been really invaluable. I got to shout out Maricopa, Central Arizona, Cochise. I cannot think of the college in Yuma, but I can see the person that leads that program and a couple of others. But also there was an actual group that I participated in off and on that was shared with me through Cochise College. It was called the ECE ZTC OER Conversations. Like I said, I joined in on this conversation, but I was never a part of the original group. But I just know that this group is based out of California, and they have just been they've been a wealth of knowledge and resources for our program. And I believe that many other institutions in the state of Arizona, early childhood programs, were able to benefit from their work as well. And I also think they received a grant to be able to create these OER materials too. Also, what I've been able to do in this transition, it's allowed me to continue to gather additional open source materials to create a catalog of indigenizing early childhood education curriculum by having articles, guest speaker recordings, videos, documentaries, speaker series that are shared through other institutions. Like I'm thinking about at U of A, they have the ITEP program, which is the Indigenous Teacher Education Program. And they have some amazing speaker series that I've been able to embed into our curriculum to share with our students. So I also wanted to share with you guys, I wish I could do like an actual screenshot of like this particular class before we started really kind of indigenizing our curriculum, but this is the best that I could come up with. So this is what I call OER in action. So on the left-hand side of my screen, it says original materials. This is a course, it's called ECE 105, Introduction to Early Childhood Education. The first module in the first chapter in the textbook talks about the history of early childhood education. And it's pretty basic. And I feel like it's very much what I learned when I started studying this field 20 plus years ago. We discuss philosophers, theorists, key terms, how children were viewed as second class citizens, also talking about the National Association Education for Young Children, which is our professional organization in early childhood, when it was established, and why Head Starts were established. These are just high level key points from that particular chapter or module. And then the learning activity, I remember kind of tweaking it a little bit, but originally what was shared was you create a PowerPoint presentation identifying 3 philosophers and theorists that you connected with the most. I found that even sharing that material with the students, and this was an open source book, and we still use it, but this is the beauty of open source. I was able to take the same conversation, the same module, and transition it to what we're doing now, our OER materials. So same course, same module, the history of early childhood education. And now that section, I call it the Western perspective of early childhood education. And I share with the students, I'm like, guys, I know it may be hard to connect with some of these materials. There are some videos that even I say to them, I kind of cringe when I watch them, but it's important because a lot of this information that's being shared in the textbook is what is foundational knowledge in our field. And so we talk about it from that lens for one night of a lecture. And then we spend the next 5 weeks talking about the transition to discuss what was actually happening to tribes during the 1800s to the mid 1960s in early childhood education. And again, these are like high level bullet points. Families raised their own children. There was boarding schools, and then the Head Starts came in the mid to late 60s, 1960s. So now the learning activity becomes identifying an elder, educator, or an Indigenous scholar, or a person of color who has influenced your approach in early childhood education. But I hope just seeing this in action on how you can take OER material and really make it more connected for students, and just me sharing again like a very high level perspective on how we were able to just do this in one class. Obviously been able to make these transitions throughout different classes, but my point is, especially working at a tribal college, I can't just talk about history as if there wasn't other history happening beforehand. And that was the challenge with having published textbooks, is that it wasn't acknowledging other voices and other perspectives of what was happening in early childhood. And so that's been the beauty of us making the transition to OER materials. These are just some of the bullet points that I thought of in terms of positive impact transitioning our program, our ECE program. So increase active learning and engagement. I remember when I first started at Tohono O'odham Community College, I would, teach. I consider myself a high energetic person. Maybe you don't see this in this presentation, but I like to be engaging. I think education should be fun. We're working with young children. It should be fun and interactive. I found once we switched to open source materials, the learning became more active because the students could connect with the materials. The curriculum became more relatable to the students because it was more indigenized and it reflected them as individuals. The materials became more accessible because now I can embed the textbook and all the other open source materials directly into their module. And then students sharing their knowledge and resources. And so it's become more of a place where we're all learning. And I always say that to students. I'm like, guys, I'm a non-native person and I know that. And I'm not going to know every piece of history and all the knowledge, but we can all share these things together and collectively learn from each other. And there have been times where students have shared articles with me, videos, documentaries that I was able to just immediately add into our curriculum to enhance it. And it was able to enhance that current semester, and then I could build on these things in future semesters to come. The college-wide initiative. So why did the college transition to OER? So this actual initiative took place in spring of 2022. And our librarian at our college, Ms. Liz Cepeda, she has been a strong advocate for OER materials since she has been at the college. And part of the reason why is having OER materials really does align with our mission and the intent of being able to indigenize our materials. Because again, I'm not knocking published materials, they're great, but it doesn't always reflect all of the voices. And so I think a combination of things, and the fact that it was very challenging for students to get their physical textbooks mailed to them, um, not just mailing it to them, but getting to the students in a timely manner was a real challenge for us, and not just to students on the Tohono O'odham Nation, but students throughout the United States. So it kind of, I don't want to say it forced us to kind of make the decision, but what we were doing, it honestly wasn't working. And if the mission of the college is to really make sure that our curriculum is indigenized across all courses, OER materials was going to be the best option for us. And so the initiative was that Initially, our president said, I want everybody to be OER by the fall. Obviously, as a faculty, and even though I was 1 year ahead, I'm quoting, I knew that that was not going to be enough time. And so we definitely advocated for a little bit more time. And so the idea was like, okay, you guys have at least until fall of 2023. And so not every single course was completely OER by fall of 2023, but definitely this past fall, for the most part, all of our courses are OER. It is a requirement and it is something that we are all actively doing as faculty. Now, of course, if you're a faculty watching this, you're either like, yes, that's amazing, or you're stressing out going, how do I find that OER math textbook? Or how do I find another textbook that's just going to be as great as the one that I was using before? Definitely had all of those questions. And something that I learned in this transition that not all areas of education, whether it's general ed or business or elementary, they didn't always have like a cohort or supports within their colleagues to help them find these materials. And that's one of the challenges. It wasn't something that I experienced, but I just tried to help faculty see the benefit of it, but also like reaching out and connecting with other people outside of our college to help them find those materials. So the college transition to OER, the overall goal was aligning with the college mission and values, which again, as I mentioned, is making sure our curriculum is indigenized across all the course materials. And by being open source, we're able to honestly do that in a much more smoother way than what we could do with published materials. Of course, it's important to still have that foundational knowledge, but I think we have to acknowledge that there are there's a history of education that was happening before the college was there, before the Head Starts were there, before any of those things were there. And so it requires us to work together with our O'odham and Indigenous scholars that are there on the Tohono O'odham Nation or throughout the United States and from other tribes. The process and challenges, it took 2 academic years to make the full transition. And for any of our faculty that may still be using textbooks, they are required to be extremely low cost. That is, I don't want to use the word mandate, but that's the expectation is if you are still using a textbook, that it has to be low cost and affordable for students. Of course, having to reorganize your class materials in Canvas. And like I said before, for ECE, it's something that takes time. It's not something that happens overnight, but it takes time to reorganize your materials to align with OER. Finding and identifying OER materials was a real challenge for many of my peers. I tried to help them as best as I could in trying to find if there were some other connections that they could use. But another challenge was the idea that you could manipulate or change those materials to enhance it. Sometimes, we're kind of used to our tradition, like, no, you don't change it. You just leave it as is. So that was a challenge for us. And then, of course, developing policies around OER materials as well. Some lessons that were learned. I would say connect with your colleagues within your institution or others outside of your institution is really important. I know for a fact that our early childhood program would not be where it is at, if it wasn't for um, not just myself, but just other institutions sharing what they have, whether it was their OER Commons course or sharing their actual textbook, their OER textbook that aligns with, I'm thinking of like early childhood 125 course. It's a nutrition, health, and safety course. And one of the colleges had already aligned all of our health and safety things in Arizona in this particular textbook. And so just sharing that, just the fact that you can share things is really meaningful. Building your catalog of materials, it's never ending. I feel like I'm always going to be able to collect materials, enhance things. Every semester, each class goes through some level of enhancement. The catalog never ends. And that's the beautiful part of open source materials. Students will request a physical copy of materials. Be prepared. What are you going to say? Um, I have some students that are like, is there any way you can print it? What can you do? Can you mail me this? And one of the things I know for the college, I mean, I've had to talk with my academic dean about this and even our librarian. It's out of need. Like if it's going to help them make the materials more accessible for them, then we're able to print those physical copies. But for the most part, out of 100+ students, I've maybe had three ask for physical copies. But I just want to say, just be prepared. You will have students that will ask. Set one goal to enhance your materials each academic year. An example of this for me was like identifying one documentary for each course to embed into my materials to develop an assignment. Just so I can always be trying to enhance those materials, looking at materials that students have shared with me, and figuring out how I can embed that to our open source materials has been really helpful. I'm confident that there's so many other lessons that I've learned, but these are just the ones that have come to mind. Some of the success to OER textbooks in early childhood, I would say, well, success and then also things that we're working towards is developing OER policies at our college. Um, we're now to a point in the early childhood program to actually start indigenizing the course materials using OER. So I've been working closely with our Auckland language culture director and looking at one course at a time and figuring out, okay, based off of these materials and what I have, how can we actually start embedding this in creating the actual books and stuff. It's been really fascinating. We do have a grant that is allowing us to be able to have some additional support, but it's really helpful that we're actually to the point where it's not just embedded in Canvas, but we can actually start creating our own chapters in some of these books. As I mentioned before, increase student engagement. I can think about a time where I would be talking like in this space and it was completely silent, completely silent. And even when I was putting this presentation together, I realized that silence wasn't so much that students, they weren't like ignoring, it just, they couldn't connect to the material. That's what it boiled down to. But when you start bringing in documentaries or materials talking about boarding schools, um, talking about self-determination and civil rights, all of a sudden students become very engaging because again our previous textbooks and materials were not addressing these conversations at all. And then participating, I am now participating in OER fellowship, and so I know from just participating in that it's going to have great success and changes within not just the early childhood program, but also for our college and being able to support my peers and making sure that we're able to continue to use our OER materials, creating policies around this stuff, and really indigenizing our programs and our curriculum as something that the college mission and values has, along with making sure that we're serving the education department and the desires of why this college was built in the first place. So we're on the cusp of like making those dreams be fulfilled, and that's really exciting for us. Okay, anyone have any questions or comments?
You.
I do. Go ahead.
Nathan, you want to go first? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Nathan.
sure. I'll go first. So you're talking about lots of good things to ask, but the one that you just talked about, physical copies, I guess I'll ask that one question first. So I also have been in that situation where students ask for a physical copy of, a 300 page PDF. And I'm wondering, does your library just print off the whole PDF, or do they just do sections at a time, or do you send it off to a printer to put together a document, or I don't know, a bound document. I've always
Right.
kind of wanted to put it into something a little nicer than just a bunch of copied papers.
Yes. So it's I feel like my answer is that I feel like it's all over the place, but it's we can't just send it off, so that's not really an option. But we are able to print, um, and what our librarian and even our education coordinator has done, we've just printed the section. And usually, if we just do the section, and usually, I don't know, by like week 3 or 4 in the class, like students are like, oh, well, I'll just look at it from my tablet, or I'll just look at it from my computer because they've realized, like, do I really need to print it? And previously, we had printed the full entire text. And again, students realize when they take another class with me, they're like, maybe I didn't need to print the whole thing. And so it's just kind of something that's happened over time. And like I said, there's different answers for different times of which I've been doing OER. But I'm thinking of these same students where it's like they're not asking to print this stuff anymore. They're like, no, miss, I think I'm good. I like the way the modules are laid out. They're very student friendly and it's not as overwhelming. And I think part of what is happening is like they're used to education being, in their textbook and everything is there. And it's like, we're actually, everything is right there in your module, everything you need, everything. And so helping them see that and the value in that has been really helpful for them. And really, I would say if we are printing anything, it might be for elders, but most of the students are not printing them anymore as much as they were asking for it like 4 years ago.
Well, first of all, I want to say you're amazing, and I want to invite you to come talk to our faculty.
Oh,
This is so
wow.
you're amazing with this work. This is a lot of work, and just your consideration for your students is really inspiring. Um, so you mentioned that there was I mean, a mandate, right, from Tohono O'odham Community College to say we're going OER, and I'm wondering if you had um, like faculty that just put their feet in the ground, I guess, or their head in the I don't know, whatever that saying is, and just I mean, because I could imagine at Pima College that there would be a riot if we ever had any kind of mandate on what faculty were to do. Now, a department might be able to say it, and kind of get everybody on board together. But I'm just wondering how that worked because we did have a grant and they were trying to do some of that. And now I found that I can't even talk to some faculty. They just won't listen to OER at all. And I think it's because they fell a mandate. So I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think, and I had this conversation with our librarian because I said, Liz, I don't even because we were in early childhood, we were already doing it. So even when the mandate came down, I was like, oh, okay. I kind of tuned it out, but then I had to ask her, I said, how did we come to this? And she said, it's part of our mission and values. We want the curriculum to be indigenized. It's not going to happen with these published books. And that's the reality of it. And when she put it that way, it made me reflect back to my first semester being handed these old syllabi in textbooks. And I'm like, my voice is not even in these books, let alone my students. And so I think we're just used to like having just such strong foundational knowledge in our fields that the idea that there's other voices and perspectives, I think can be really hard and challenging. Um, I'm not saying that we didn't like everybody was like, oh yeah, this is great, because it wasn't that way either. Because we do have some faculty that are published in some of these textbooks, and they're like, I need this book for my class. Um, and so would I say that they still pushed back and still had to make the transition? Yes, because it always came back to the mission and values. And I think it would really depend on the institution. But I feel like for us, because we're a tribal college, it doesn't, going open source just makes the most sense. Um, Especially, I think for me being in early childhood, I'm just like, I don't know how I could have even begun to ask them to purchase those books, let alone read them. And every semester I kept testing out different books and I just wasn't happy with them, you know. But I also don't have like an emotional tie to published books. And probably because I myself had used open source materials as a student. And I really appreciated how the materials were very much tailored to what I was studying. It was relatable, I could connect to it. And then there were still other materials and articles and peer reviews and all of that that the professor was able to add to the modules to make it even more enhancing. Um, I can't say that there was one specific thing that made everybody do it. It definitely took us longer because of the kind of like, pushback and resistance. But I also know part of the challenge too was like people were just not finding the materials. And then this idea that you could create them was like, wait, I can create, like I can bring things in. Um, that was kind of overwhelming for some. And that's why I remember even explaining like having this requirement and asking people to do this by fall was just unrealistic. I'm like, I was 1 year in and still was like, I need more time, you know? Um, I don't feel like I gave a perfect answer, but I just know a lot of it for us, it ties in with our mission and goals. And with all the PD that we've received, it always talks about like Indigenous pedagogy and the importance of it and why. And so OER was like pretty much our gateway into that space.
Yeah, that's awesome because then, like, what is somebody supposed to say? No, we shouldn't do that.
Right. Like then it's just awkward. Like, so then what are you doing? But then also help, I also think too, like helping my peers understand it's not just the book. Like you're probably pulling other materials in anyway. Because I know for a fact that not all these books are really relatable to us or our students. So you probably are pulling in materials. Why not embed it and create what it is that you actually need? And so I just think that it's just an idea of like, oh, it's just the textbooks. It's more than just that, and just helping them see that they're probably already doing it. And now you're just enhancing what you do.
Yeah, it's making me think how I mean, Pima is a Hispanic serving institution, and making me think like how to better connect that kind of um, philosophy. Like these books aren't speaking to our students either. I mean, they're not speaking to me.
Right. That's how I felt. I was like, I don't even feel like, I mean, just talking about like positive guidance with children, it just was like none of this was connecting. And when I think about like how quiet my classes were versus now, it's a completely different space. And I'm like, oh, well, it's because we can connect with the materials because now you're actually understanding why certain rights and things have become accessible to you because you have the history behind it and the materials are reflecting that versus before it wasn't reflecting that at all.
May I say something? This is Laura. I am,
Hi.
hi, I really enjoyed your presentation. I have audio problems, so that's why you're not able to see me.
Okay.
Yeah, so I am have done librarianship. That's been my career for more than 20 years. And I am an Indigenous Dene from the Navajo Nation. And so you speak This is all interesting to me as well, and I'm really happy that the OER, one of our main speakers, talked about indigenous knowledge and research and methods. That's also very brand new, and I'm excited about that. So you mentioned that your students are quiet. And yes, and I think that because of growing up in going to school in boarding schools and also in rural areas and then even in college, um, speaking as this is my experience is I was um, uh, in a sense, I think most Native American, most indigenous students are sometimes um, identified as being quiet. It is because we don't understand the curriculum. We don't understand that relational uh, 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 way of learning and teaching and life and being connected. That is so hard. It's difficult to make those connections when you don't have that, when you don't have an instructor or even leadership that does not understand the settler history. And so
Yes.
and you bring that, and so I think that we're sometimes labeled as being stereotyped as being quiet. So
Mm-hmm.
that this is part of that. And so I'm glad you mentioned that when you make this, when you made your curriculum relational to the students and, bringing in student voices, and you started to hear all of, the how active and engaged they were and voicing their concerns. Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I record class. I would never share the classes, but if I went back to those old recordings from like 4 years ago till now, if I'm lecturing for the lack of better terms, and just like I'm talking with you guys right now, and I say, okay, guys, anybody have any questions, thoughts, or comments? It will start with one student, and then we're like 20 minutes later, and I'm like, wow, I remember when I remember, but thank you so much for saying that, Miss Laura, because I really try not to. I hope you didn't feel like I was labeling the students in any way, but it was definitely a season in our program. But once we started making those changes, it's like very, very different. And their grades improved as well, increased passing rate. Like it just the program has just changed on so many different levels because of it.
So I've just been thinking about what Laura just said because it was on my mind while you were talking. I grew up in Eastern United States, and now that I'm teaching out here, I've been trying to figure out how to better connect with my Indigenous students. And and so listening, of course, to much of the talks today, but especially yours, I'm thinking more about things that I could potentially do that would help break down barriers um, in biology. And so if
Mhm.
you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them.
Wow. I mean, I guess in a great way, one of my really good friends, she taught biology at the college. And so, but we never like looked into each other's courses. Um, But I think what she was able to do, she's Dene Navajo, and so she was able to bring in speakers into her class, and then just her own knowledge that she had. That's what she was able to do in the biology course itself. And this is just based off of what she has shared with me in conversations. I know that she used some sort of OER material. I would have to ask her and find out like which OER, because I believe that they're still using her biology course with our adjuncts now, but I'm not quite sure what particular text and how she built out her Canvas modules. but I know she also did some, they would do some, I think they would also go out onto the nation and do some work at our West Campus as well. But she just found ways for the students to connect. Um, and again, I think it just goes back to like our mission of the college. It's like we have to do it. It's not like optional for us. Um, but I feel like that's what she would do. And she was teaching that class asynchronous and synchronously. But I would have to ask her, and I know we're both in the OER fellowship, so I'll ask her and then I'll be able to follow up and share what things did she actually do specifically.
I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Yeah, I put in the chat that it reminded me of, I don't know if anybody's read Braiding Sweetgrass. It's she's a biology, she's an I don't know the tribe or nation she's from, somewhere east, I don't know. But she's a biology teacher, Nathan, who's also a tribal member and integrates both science and indigenous thinking and all these cool things. Amazing book. I have never been so fascinated by what is it called? Oh God. I can't think now. What's the thing on rocks that's both an animal and plant? Help me.
Lichen?
I can't think of. I don't know. I couldn't. I've never been so fascinated with lichen in my life. Yeah, but yeah.
I'll look it up. I'll look that book up.
Yes.
Me too. I'll look it up. There's you could also probably reach out and email, get on that email list through the Arizona email list for I think there's like different disciplines. I forget the name. I've gotten so much information. I can send that as well, and I think I can find you in the network. I don't remember the exact address, but it's the email list to the Community College OER network here in Arizona. Do you know?
Is that the OER Arizona Community Network?
Yeah, go there and
I'm
get yourself on the email and get with the biology and the other, instructors that are, wanting to develop OER courses and the 22 indigenous tribes in Arizona. So we have 22 plus, and then we have also some natives here that are also not federally recognized. Yeah.
Mhm. And I would say too, like U of A may have some connections, and I know NAU has been working with TCU's. They have a big project, and they've actually been coming down and like presenting to us and us presenting to them, but maybe reaching out to their, I can't remember the name of this. I can't remember it. I'll look it up, Nathan, and I'll be sure to follow up with you because we've had people from their science department share with us. So that might be helpful.
Yeah, and then with the educational leadership with Indigenous, the great resources is down there at Tucson, Rebuilding Native Nations. Very, I rely on those resources too. So,
Yes. I feel like when it comes to OER, like especially kind of being new into the space in Arizona, it's just making the connections. And, having a conference like this, and you're like, oh, I had no idea that these things existed. That's pretty much what I felt like I was doing 4 years ago. It was just like, oh, okay, so this group is doing that, this college is doing this, and then you just start sharing things. And then before you know it, you're able to kind of build out something that you feel like will be more meaningful for your students. But I certainly, with that 105 course, even till this day, now my struggle is okay, we have to stop talking about this at least 6 weeks because we have other things we have to cover. But that's been a 4 year journey, in 2021, the ITEP had just started doing the speaker series. Now I have to choose like which part of the speaker series do I want to use in class, because there's just so much more information that's more accessible to us. I just feel like half of the battle is connecting with people.
Um, this is Laura. What was the organization that's associated with the speaker series that you mentioned?
Oh, it's the Indigenous Teacher Education Program, ITEP. And they started doing speaker series in 2021, and it's geared towards Indigenous educators. But the topics are amazing. That's all I can say. Um,
Could you send the link out? Thank you.
yes, let me see if I can like exit out of this screen and then try to I'm going to stop sharing for a second so I can try to get to where I want to go. And then share that with you guys. Mm,
I think I have it if you want me to put it in.
yeah, I just grabbed it too.
Good.
So
Oh, there you
whoever,
go. Yeah, go ahead.
okay, there we go. And then here's my email address to anyone that feels compelled to email me. Any other questions or anything?
We still have about 8 minutes left, so
Okay.
we still have some time. And it looks like Matthew shared some links to the Arizona OER Commons Hub with some of those communities, subject-based communities for people to connect to as well.
You
Thank
said
you.
you teach online, but are you teaching like in a virtual, synchronous kind of a space?
So I teach synchronous and asynchronous and hybrid on Wednesdays. When I'm on campus, we have our smart board and we have some new tech. I can't think of the proper name for it, but anyhow, um, prior to COVID, I would have maybe 4 to 5 students in person. And now I usually average 1 to 3 students in person, and then everybody else is on Zoom. So most of my students are getting off from work, and depending on where they're located on the nation, they might be able to travel in. But it can be a real challenge because it can be an hour to 45 minutes away, depending. So
I was just wondering, how do you build like community online with very interesting just
how do I feel about like our college being online the way that we are, or like
well,
the
I was just thinking about the building relationship, that relational skills, uh do you use any like techniques, or does the school, the college have any um resources like in terms of uh building that location and identifying yourself, like the village, your village and your families, and is that allowed on when you have these meetings, when students are meeting? I'm not really, I don't know how that works.
Let me see if I'm understanding what you're asking. Like if students want to meet, like say at a Head Start to join class, are you asking like can they join virtual in that way or like building other buildings so then they can meet at like a community center for class if they can't travel to the college?
Yeah, so how does that work since the geography is so, I mean, and the driving distance. I'm just thinking about, the Navajo reservation, how vast. Yeah.
Yes. So I feel like I'm going to give a loaded answer. So locally on the Tohono O'odham Nation, there's been conversations of like working, I want to say either adding a building or working with the activity center at Pacinema to basically be able to allow students to gather there because that's also rural, but another good like meeting point. And I believe like our language and culture center was able to set up like Starlink to be available so they can have events and then students can connect that way. We're having conversations with Salt River, which is one of the sister tribes. Um, and they want to do a cohort of like 9 to 12 students, but they're going to stay at their site and then come in virtually through their smart board and then be able to join into class. Um, that's pretty much what we've been able to do. The other options of what we've been able to do is being able to provide students with technology, as far as like getting an iPad or getting a laptop through grants. That's been very helpful. The only thing that we're not really able to do is being able to provide them internet. Like we can't, most of our grants won't allow us to just pay for internet for students. But we are working closely with their education departments to figure out ways in which students can still get their education done because they're still being mandated to complete their degrees. And these were barriers pre-pandemic, and there's still barriers now. There are just parts of the nation where there's no broadband internet. And so higher ups, like presidents of the college, are working through those things. But I just work with students as best as I can. And even recording lectures, people have asked me, well, why do you do that? Well, because students may start out watching the class in their workspace, but then they go home and they don't have internet. And so I want them to be able to download and still be able to be connected, and be able to complete their work. So it's just, I feel like for personally, like I've just had to be very creative to make sure things are just as accessible as possible while working within the confines of the system of like that modular may not be built tomorrow, but it's a conversation and something that they're actively working towards.
Okay, so yeah, so we have similar um I guess challenges. We still have a lot of challenges with certain areas in throughout the Navajo Nation where we don't the communities don't have the internet that broadband, and so that makes it uh, that's a huge challenge that we're facing as far as bringing OER and continuing to uh, develop ways to be uh, 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 to stay up with the outside world information,
Mm-hmm.
and then on top of that, on top of this, education. So, yeah.
And I would say, because I have a 2 minute warning, the other big piece is like when I'm not teaching, then I have to go out into the field and have the conversations and meet with the educators, meeting, like actually meeting with them. And that's just something that I said to my dean. I was like, I have to get into the field because we're not going to be able to solve problems or concerns or figure out how to create solutions if we're not actually going out. And so that is something that I do at least once a month on Fridays. That's one goal because we're still a one person program managing quite a bit. But that makes a difference because then we're able to come back and say, this is what this program is needing and how can we make these changes?
Well, thank you so much for your presentation and the conversation afterwards. It was so great. And we have less than a minute, I'm sure, now. So if there's any last things you would like to say, go ahead. Otherwise,
Just thank you guys for showing up. I appreciate it. And this was great. You guys have my email address, so feel free to connect with me afterwards. And good luck. And I hope you all are inspired to do OER. And I hope that my presentation inspired you guys to do the work. Thank you.